Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. I am criscrosaplesos, and today I got a video for you that's going to be going over the setup that I am using to try and push higher and higher Zirs, the AoZs, the Abattoir of Zirs. But I've been working on also some other things and playing some other games, so I haven't really been focusing on this since the season is coming to a close anyways. But if you hit that like and subscribe and leave a comment, I will be doing content for Diablo 4 for every single season, and I will be obsessively fine-tuning my rogue builds and may even venture into, oh my goodness, some other types of character builds. Anyways, so like I did with my last video, I'm going to, since it's a seasonal character, get into the vampiric powers first. We're still running Undying. This is our main source of healing ourselves and basically the only way that we're going to stay alive. We are going to be attacking quick as hell because we're going to be having the accelerating aspect as well as the rapid aspect. And Moonrise and Ravenous both increase our attack speed and do not cover the soft cap. So we can get our attack speed bonus up to, why am I all the way down now? Up to 125.6, which isn't great. You can get your attack speed without soft capping up to about 170 if you do everything correctly, but I feel like this is more than enough to keep you alive and get your combo points up quick, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. So yeah, went over Undying. Metamorphosis obviously is still our main maneuverability skill because we're going to be evading around, attacking, evading, attacking, and basically being unstoppable all the time and having our damage buff from Tibalt's Will procced all the time. So yeah, Metamorphosis is very, very important. We went over Moonrise and Ravenous. Now, Prey of the Week is optional. The only reason I'm doing it right now is because I am automatically vampiric cursing any enemy I evade through, as well as 16% multiplicative increase to my vulnerable damage is very good because I have now pumped a full 3 points into Malice, and everything is going to be vulnerable due to Blended Shadow Imbuement. I don't have a lot of vulnerable damage pumped into my Paragon tree, but that's something we can go over later, and you can remedy that. But for right now, I'm very comfortable with the amount of crowd control damage I've pumped into the build, giving myself a whopping 154% increased damage when we have both close quarters combat and attack speed bonuses, which again is going to be all the time because you have an 8-second window. So all you have to do is make sure you dash at least once every 8 seconds. And you should, with 2 stacks of dash, always be able to. And because we are also using... Oops, I need to switch that. And because we're also using Methodical Dash, you should always be able to have at least 1 dash available in any 8-second period. Okay, so that's the vampiric powers. Good luck, have fun. Specialization, obviously, is combo points. Now, if you watched my bossing one-shot video build, the skill tree is not entirely different from it. There are a couple subtle little changes, like we are actually using an imbuement, and we are not hard focusing on stacking critical strike damage. We are more focused on just doing a moderate amount of damage consistently and staying the heck alive. So obviously we've got Puncture again with Fundamental Puncture. This is one way that we guarantee a vulnerable proc on single targets if that's the situation we're in. Everything you can into Rapid Fire, and again, we're still going to be grabbing Advanced Rapid Fire because we don't need to worry about our energy regeneration at all, even though we are going to have a significant source of vulnerability proccing. That's a mouthful. So we're still pumping everything in the Weapon Mastery because that is more increased critical strike damage. I'm not throwing anything into Reactive Defense because we have our Vampiric power that gives us unstoppable every time we evade for 4 seconds, and we can do that all the time, so we should not have any control and parrying effects on us ever. So having any points into this is pointless. But 27% damage reduction against damage over time is very nice, especially since just about everything in higher tier AoZ bleeds and poisons and does all that nasty jazz. Caltrops, again, is a huge damage increase for us, and we're doing methodical caltrops now because our critical strike chance is well enough to not have to worry about at all. And if we switch the cold on here, that's going to give them another layer of crowd control, and it's going to give them a chance to freeze, which with 3 points into Frigid Finesse gives you a nice cheeky little damage buff. If you cannot get an amulet with Weapon Mastery increased on it, then go ahead and get Frigid Finesse, or get yourself Malice or Exploit. Any of those 4 is going to work out very well for your damage output. I've switched this around. I'm going to throw 1 point into Rapid Gambits and another point into Trick Attacks. Again, we're not worried about our critical strike chance. It's already high enough. Your evade cooldown is reduced by half a second every time you daze an enemy. We're going to be dazing a lot of enemies between our smoke grenades and our dash, so that's just another guarantee that if you can't get the 3 attacks off that you need to in order to reset your evade, that you can almost always have it back immediately anyways with the dash or the actually it is just the dash, because you can dash through enemies, that dazes them, and then you daze whoever's around you at the end with the smoke grenade. So bada bing bada boom. Moving along, speaking of the dash, we're going to be grabbing just 1 point into dash, obviously, and then methodical dash. And since everything around us is going to be crowd controlled, reducing the cooldown of dash also gives us another layer of assurance, or rather insurance, that we will always at least have 1 stack of dash at least every 8 seconds, so we can maintain both bonuses from the Close Quarters Combat Keystone passive. Moving along, 1 point into Dark Shroud, and then we're going to be selecting... Actually, that's wrong. We're going to be using Subverting Dark Shroud, just because movement speed is very, very nice to have no matter what. And if you are one that likes to have even more movement speed than you need to, or you're wearing boots like Isu's or something like that, always consider Stutter Step. It's just up to, I think, a, what, 15%? Yeah, 15% movement speed increase, which is nice. Oh yeah, I didn't go over 3 points into Sturdy and Siphoning. These are just pretty much... This is another way to heal us a little bit, since we are going to be attacking a lot of enemies close quarters most of the time. And just basic close quarters damage reduction is very nice as well. Obviously, that 12% goes on top of all the other that we already have. So we talked about Dark Shroud. 3 points into Agile is very key. Having that extra 12% dodge chance gets us to a 20% dodge chance all the time, which 20.2% dodge chance all the time, which is 1 out of every 5 attacks that comes at us, we're not getting hit. So that's just a base 20%, 100% damage reduction, if that makes sense. So just those 3 points in that one thing is very, very, very helpful. Real quick, while I'm talking about survivability, there is something else you can do. If you have managed to get your armor up above 8,000 or up above 9 to 10,000 without having to use the aspect of disobedience, I would highly suggest using the deflecting barrier aspect and throwing it on your amulet, and then throwing your aspect of the protector on your chest piece, at least the highest roll that you can get. You'll still get 9 to 10,000 barrier if it's on your chest piece. And with this on your amulet, as you can see here, there's a 20% chance to ignore incoming damage from distant enemies. So on top of the 20% dodge chance that we're going to have because of the passive being procced, we're on top of that going to have 20% of all incoming damage from distance enemies just not do anything. So that's 40% right off the bat from anything that's a ranged attack on us that's not going to do anything, which is huge for especially for AoZ, especially since these don't stack multiplicatively. The higher that these get, the more you add to them, the less they affect. There is a little bit of a diminishing return. But with that said, there are things like a Harlequin Quest, a Shaco. Let's just go with that. There are things like the Shaco and the aspect of Might that both give you a flat 20% damage reduction. That's all around. Those do stack multiplicatively with each other. So those are very, very nice. If you can put this on your chest, have your Shaco on, get high rolls on your amulets and your other gear for your damage reduction, and you'll be very, very happy. Anyways, moving along. Where was I at? We already talked about exploit and Malice, throw 3 points in each of those. Smoke Grenade. This is another one, we already talked about. This is another one of our ways to daze, other than dash. Enhanced Smoke Grenade is huge. I use it for all of my bossing because it's a free 25% increase multiplicative damage, which is very, very nice. Now, this is Subverting Smoke Grenade is something that I was sleeping on for the longest time, but it's actually really, really good. 20% increase to the daze on them, and their daze is 6 seconds. So 1/5 of 6 seconds is a little bit more than a second. So instead of 6 seconds, they're down for 7.5 or so seconds, which that might not seem like much, but it's every little second counts when it comes to dazing and keeping elites dazed, so that you can kill them and burn them with fire and everything that you can, because they're horrible things. Since we're not directly casting Smoke Grenade ourselves, we're just using the aspect on our boots to have it cast automatically at the end of dash. Countering Smoke Grenades would be a waste, so don't even look at it. 0 out of 10, don't recommend. Here's another nice cheeky little bit of crowd control. You don't have to have 3 points into this if you don't want, especially if you're not stacking any damage into specifically stun, which, as you can see, I have no damage to stun. If you are, I highly suggest the aspect of Retribution, which will give you a nice chunk increase to whatever percentage you have to stunned enemies in your base stats. The only problem is that does take up an offensive slot, which you only have your rings and your two-handed, which your two-handed really needs to be the rapid aspect. So you really only have 2 options with other offensive stuffs. And obviously the repeating one is huge for just using one core skill. So really that means that you only have one sort of optional offensive aspect that you can switch around, unless you are willing to sacrifice 2 levels of your rapid fire and grab a pair of gloves like this with critical strike chance and lucky hit chance. It would be nice with a dex roll or an attack speed roll, but as you can see here, I threw on the aspect, the Icy Alchemist aspect, which is very, very nice to give some additional chill on enemies, especially the elites, to get them frozen real quickly inside your caltrops, and the little bit of explosion damage. It is cold damage, so it's not going to stack higher than that 28-13, but it is still nice to have because that's still DPS being put on the enemies. But you don't have to have this aspect on there. If you don't feel like doing any of that because you already have enough crowd control friggin' everywhere, then it might not be a bad idea to switch these 3 out for something else that you're more comfortable with, or you could move them down to here so that chilled enemies have their speed reduced up to 30% more, keeping elites inside of your caltrops for a little bit longer is very nice. So there's an option there. We're going to be using Shadow Imbuement pretty much just to spread vulnerable. It does do a nice little chunk of damage, especially getting rid of all of the trash mobs. There are a lot of different ways you can increase your damage output. There are a lot of cool interactions between the imbuments. If you want to sacrifice one of your aspects and mess around with that, I highly recommend it. But in that case, you're going to want to pump more into whatever your main damage imbue is. You're going to want to add everything you can into Precision Imbuement. And on top of that, you're going to want to switch around a couple of things in your Paragon tree, using gems that increase stuff like your non-physical damage and your imbuement skill damage. Moving along. No ultimate, although something that you can do, which is super fun, if you're down for it, is to, with the Grasp of Shadows, you do a lot of extra Shadow Clone damage. So you can, instead of having an imbuement, and instead of having boots with resistances on them, since resistances kind of don't mean shit, later on you're going to get one shot by anything anyways, you can throw on a pair of Flicker Step and basically have a Shadow Clone with you all the time, which is super, super fun. But it is really only super duper effective if you are pumping damage to ultimate skills and using the new ultimate Paragon node that they switched around this league. Where is it? Where'd you guys put it? Where is it? Yeah, your ultimate skills gain an additional 10% multiplicative damage from your damage with ultimate skills bonus, and grant this bonus to all skills for 8 seconds. So this could potentially be absolutely huge, just with the Shadow Clone, not even speaking about using it with Rain of Arrows or with Death Trap. But anyways, I digress. Yeah, so all we're doing over here is pumping 3 points into Intervention. This is our main source of resource regeneration, and back to close quarters combat for our Keystone passive. Okay, let's go through the Paragon board real quick. You're going to want to get your Tears of Blood as quick as possible. I also will have a video coming out very soon that is a way to, if you can't get the uniques that you want, then I have painstakingly designed a build that uses no uniques that can clear the very first tier of Zir. So you can get your glyph and then start leveling it up. Anyways, our first glyph socket is going to be combat. And then we're going to grab all the damage that we can in here, including the prime node down here. We're just going to grab up to, you know, get our 25%, or we're just going to grab our 25 intel in here to get critical strikes restore 12% of their energy cost. This is on top of the lucky hit chance energy regen, makes it so we don't have to worry about our resource at all. The second board I'm using is Tricks of the Trade. This is kind of absolutely necessary for anybody that's using close quarter combat. It's just free extra damage because you always are going to be going back and forth between a cutthroat skill and a marksman skill. So that's free 25% multiplicative extra damage. I am grabbing Ranger over here more for the damage reduction from distant enemies with the two other nodes, the two smaller nodes, and then this one is another 12% damage reduction from distant enemies, which is very nice to have. And of course, we're coming down here and grabbing a 30% more critical strike damage and 10% physical damage. Both affect our main damage output significantly. The glyph we're using here is going to be efficacy. Don't worry about stacking any intelligence into it. With Shadow Imbue, I'm not too worried about that. All it would do is give me about another 1,000 to 2,000 damage of shadow damage. And since I'm not stacking anything else into that, I'm just using the Shadow Imbue to proc vulnerable on everything around me. I'm not wasting the Paragon points to get the additional bonus. But I do rather enjoy the 125% bonus to all rare nodes within range, which one of them is damage to elites, which gives you a whopping 72% increased damage to elites and a whopping 22 to your dex. And up here you get a nice little chunk of 400 armor and another 22 dex. Highly recommend using that there. Next Paragon board is Cheap Shot. This is actually really nice if you can find the points and sacrifice them somewhere else and go ahead and use 5 of them to grab yourself Cheap Shot here. It's a very noticeable damage increase, especially when you're in a group of enemies or in a dungeon that has lots of small corridors and you really don't have room to get away and be distant. It's very nice to have that. So that is an option. I don't have it selected. I've been able to do just fine without it. But that's, you know, your prerogative. We're going to be grabbing all but one of the rare nodes here because they're all going to be crowd control. And while damage reduction from elites is also very, very nice to have. We are not going to be grabbing the damage to healthy like we did. Actually, does it have critical strike damage on it? No, it has armor on it. That's the only reason I have this one still selected is for the critical strike damage. I don't need that there. Actually might. Does that give me 4 points? So let's go ahead and there we go. You're watching me adjust the build in action. You're welcome. So yeah, now I'm gonna be doing a lot better with that kind of damage. So yeah, we're grabbing Calculated, grabbing Oppress, and we're grabbing Safeguard. Also, we are going to be throwing in Pride, which is another glyph that gives you another 125% bonus to all rare nodes. And coincidentally, we have a damage to crowd control node right here, which is going to give us almost 70% extra damage to crowd controlled, which is delightful. And since we are using Puncture, and almost all the enemies around us are going to be slowed. Now, moving down from there, we're going to be using exploit weakness, but I'm not going to be grabbing anything in here other than the crazy amount of intelligence that's in this section here for a delightful 145% extra damage to crowd control and 10% multiplicative damage to slowed or chilled enemies, or 20% to stunned or frozen enemies, which everything about this benefits the heck out of our damage output for this build. So then from there, moving along, I've got No Witness, which again, I'm grabbing this for the base damage that's in this node here, and the maximum life increase that's in this node here. If you don't have your Tears of Blood yet, I would go ahead and throw a Diminish in here and get your bonus, because that's just free physical damage reduction from all the enemies around you that are going to be vulnerable. And you're going to get more of a bonus than what I'm getting out of my Tears of Blood when it comes to the rares. Obviously, the Tears of Blood's main thing is that 102% damage increase with all of the main stats selected within its range. But with Diminish socketed in here, you're still going to get a nice cheeky 25% or 45% increase to your damage and 18% increase to your maximum life. It's very, very good option for this slot. 10 out of 10, highly recommend. All right, so there you have it. There's my setup for pushing the earlier tiers of Zir. The gameplay is going to be pretty much simplistic. You're going to be dashing into the elites, evading away, or sorry, caltropsing away, and then evading, and then letting them have it. This is what you're going to rinse and repeat. And with your Shadow Imbue, all the trash mobs are going to get exploded, and all of the elites are going to become vulnerable and take a lot more damage from you, making it very simple. Now, the Bloodseekers at the very end are going to be very tricky. It's best to try and separate them, get one or two of them away from the other, and take care of them that way. Obviously, if you get lucky with a nice shrine, that can be very, 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 very helpful. But also what you can do, especially if you get them spawned or almost get them spawned and have a lot of time left on your timer, go back to town or just carry it on you, a Banished Lord's Talisman. Then you can get back to spend your 300 resource, and then your next is a guaranteed overpower. And since our crit strike chance is pretty high, you're almost guaranteed a overpowered critical strike, which should easily take care of 2, if not all 3 of the Bloodseekers at the end at once. It can be very tricky. Sometimes if you want to use the Banished Lord's Talisman, you can't separate them unless you have, a good 3, 4, 5 or more minutes left on the timer. If you're down to, a minute or 2, you're just not going to have enough time to spend all your resource that you need to get your overpower 3 different times. So it can be beneficial to try and keep them all together and then sneak attack ambush them. You know what I mean? So anyways, there is my AoZ setup. Tune in again in a couple of days. I'm going to be dropping a build guide for how to do all of endgame without any uniques, just legendary aspects. So if you're into that and just into really punishing yourself when you play this game, then definitely check that out. Please like and subscribe, leave a comment, do all that stuff that makes YouTube pay attention to me, because man, YouTube just never answers my calls or returns them anymore. So